On this episode of the Ask Will Show, I explain how to not be demoralized by losing a big sale and how to stop people being threatened by you. Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the hashtag Ask Will Show, where I answer all your sales questions in hopefully a non-bullshitty and guru kind of way. I just give my thoughts and opinions on them. So keep your questions coming in. You can ask your questions using the hashtag Ask Will Show on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. And yes, on that front, very soon, you're going to be able to listen to this on iTunes, through the podcasting app, and also on a couple of Android podcasting apps as well. So if you hear me talking about YouTube and you're wondering, what the hell am I supposed to be looking at when I'm listening to it, because you're listening to it as you're jogging or you're running or you're doing whatever in the gym, then yeah, if you go to salesman.red, you can view this not just as an audio podcast, but also as a video. And for anyone who's watching on video, that's probably going to completely confuse you. And so yeah, here we go. This is the problem with the fragmentation of technology, and it kind of pulls into sales a little bit of what is the best communications platform to chat to your prospects on. Well, the answer is you've got to go where your customers are. So with all that said, let's jump into the questions.
Next Level asks, what are some good follow-up conversations you can have with customers? Sometimes it can take up to 8 calls, but each call should be different. Are there any patterns you can follow, and when do you give up?
Big question, Next Level. So I think what you're asking here is, you've obviously listened to the podcast, you know that I love frameworks and hacks and cheats and ways to go about things to make things easier and have process. Unfortunately, it's a conversation. That's the whole point. You can't really structure something like this. How can I go about putting a process? You could have it very much so that your first conversation is all about finding needs, finding what the customer wants, and then the process you're probably looking for, if you're not already doing this, is to just write everything down. So whether you're using a CRM or whether you use a notepad, I just literally have a notepad of each of my customers. I have a phone conversation with them. Same with the people on the podcast. Everyone that comes on the podcast, I scribble down everything that we talk about on the show. Next time they come on the podcast, or when I see them in person, or next time we're on the phone because there's business to be done with them, I will talk about all the stuff we talked about in the podcast and before and after the podcast as well. So what you're probably looking for is a way of tracking all this information, so that conversation 2, they mentioned that they're going skiing. So you talk to them about how their skiing trip went and all that. Conversation 3 or 4, if you need 8, and that's what you've worked out for yourself, then 7 or 8, you're probably talking 80% non-business stuff, and at the end of the conversation you're trying to close the deal with an extra 10% of, look, we've got this far, we've obviously got a relationship, let's sign on the dotted line and get this done. So hopefully that answers your question. It's very difficult to put things like this into procedures and process, which I would love to do, don't get me wrong, but you're dealing with a person. It's a two-way thing. And when it's two-way, you've obviously got to rely on feedback from what they're saying. So yeah, it might not be possible. So yeah, if you're writing everything down, you're doing more than what most salespeople do, and you're looking good.
Emmy asks, I work for a phone book company and my job is to call business owners to renew their advertising. Most common objection I receive is, no one uses the phone book anymore. How would you overcome that objection?
So Emmy, and this is a great question, I love it, and for everyone who's looking at asking questions from this point onwards, if you can give a bit more of an example around your question, it helps me answer it and it puts it in perspective for everyone else as well. You're kind of potentially in a great situation or a really sticky situation, and you're not going to like the answer to the sticky situation. So if you're in a good situation, you know that there's data that people who advertise in the phone book are getting this return. So you can be really confident in what you're saying to the prospect. You can say to them, look, just because the use of the phone book is going down perhaps, which you would assume is true, I don't know any way you'd kind of go about that. You will have your circulation rates and all that. But if everyone's jumping off, it just means that medium might be becoming more effective. So from my perspective, what I'm going to be doing with the show, salesman.red, and the podcast in the very near future is giving out free stickers and to stick on your laptops and things like that. The reason for that, and what I'm trying to do, everything that we do marketing and sales wise, I'm trying to be open about it so you can learn from it and learn from our mistakes, which there'll be a lot of, and hopefully there'll be a couple of successes in there as well, is I will then be getting the addresses of our listeners. So 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been an email address you'd have been aiming for, or Facebook like, or some kind of social media connection. You'd be wanting the person's address so you can keep following up with them. There's something very real about getting something in the post that you're not expecting from someone like me. Say it's a picture of my head with a quote that hopefully is motivational. If you've got that still on your laptop, you're going to obviously see me every single day, and that, I think that's got a bigger impact than just a quote that's on Facebook that you might like. The point of what I'm saying is that people have moved away from direct marketing and posting stuff because it's expensive, because everyone is using the internet, everyone is using technology. So your angle from the phone book, if you've got data that suggests it works, you're in quite a strong position to then be selling to these guys and explaining that, hey, just because other people are moving away doesn't mean that this isn't still effective. Even if it is starting to die down a little bit, as long as you can prove a positive return on their advertised investment, it's a no-brainer, it's a done deal. Now, the problem lies is if you can't prove any of this, whether it's you trying to blag it or whether it's the company trying to blag it and blag you. I've been in that situation before where the company said this product is the best thing, and it's only until you get in the market and you're speaking with customers that you kind of go, well, no, maybe not. Maybe the competitor is better. Maybe I shouldn't be essentially telling white lies about it. In which case, very simply, you need to change jobs. You can't let the power be with the company you're at to hold you there, essentially. How can I describe this? You as a salesperson are, if you're good at what you're doing, you're a very valuable commodity. Oh, well, you're not a commodity. You're something that's becoming decommoditized by the lack of great salespeople. So you can go pretty much anywhere you want within reason, probably earn more and take that next step. And if you're finding that your product because this would be playing on my conscience. This is probably what I'm trying to get at here. I would not feel good about selling a product which is shit and isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. It would pull on my conscience, it would be pulling on my morals, it would make me feel bad. I'd be going to work to earn money and feeling worse off for it. And so that just wouldn't wash with me. Look, I'm all about cash. We've talked about this before on the show. For me, my why is to retire early, and it's not so much that I want to just be a slob and play Xbox all day. Maybe I wanted to do that 10 years ago, but it's to be financially secure more than retire early. That's probably a better way of putting it. So you've got to look at your why. If you're making great money, you're happy selling something that might not be delivering what you're telling the customer it's going to deliver, and you've got an end goal that is worth it, you've got to put your kids through college or whatever it is, then it might be worth it for you. For me, it wouldn't be, and I'd change jobs. Hopefully that answers your question.
Tumbleweed asks, what can I do to not get so demoralized after a rip-up? And how do I handle women being threatened when their husbands talk to me?
Tumbleweed, thank you for your question. And I'm not really sure what angle you're going at here. So there's two parts to it. If you're being demoralized, this can be both a good thing and a bad thing. I get not down, but if I've got a deal and I think it's going to close and it doesn't, I'm like, I'm bummed out for 10, 20 minutes, maybe an afternoon if it happens later on in the day. I don't allow it to go any further than that. Your thoughts and how you're feeling and all that soft stuff that perhaps salespeople and salesmen especially try and and I do it, you're trying to crush it down and you ignore it and you put it somewhere at the back of your brain. It all adds up over time, and it's important to understand it. If you're feeling demoralized, have a think about why. Is it because you've not got enough stuff in your pipeline and so you needed to close that deal, otherwise you're not going to hit your target and you're going to have problems and your manager's going to be mad and you're obviously not going to get the commissions? Then it's not to be demoralized about that specific deal. It's to be demoralized that you've not done enough at the front end and the prospecting. It's something that we talk about a lot on the show. If you're demoralized and you can just go straight to the next thing, then I see it as a good thing. This is what I like happening to me. Not like happening, I don't mind it when it does happen, because my pipeline is that full that I just don't care. If someone doesn't close a deal, I'm like, oh man, I've worked hard on this, fine, it hasn't happened. Perhaps spend 10 minutes analysing why it hasn't happened so you can stop that whatever problem that has occurred happening again. But you've got to understand that to have the highs of sales, of when you do close that big deal and you get super excited and you're pumped about it, you need to have the lows. Everyone has this kind of baseline and you've got to go above and below it. Some people are like this, some people are like this. I'm more like this. I'm quite flat, and there's a good thing and a bad thing of I never get depressed, but then when good things happen, I'm always a bit more stoic about it of, okay, that's happened, now let's move on and keep going and keep plodding away. Some people, and this is where things like antidepressants come in, some people are just like way off the charts, like I'm off camera with my hands to try and I've got solid long arms to try and show that, but it's not necessarily a bad thing is what I'm trying to say. You've got to work out why you're demoralized and suss out a way of going around that. Now, to the second part of your question, which I'll keep very brief, if anyone's feeling threatened by the way you're selling, you're doing it wrong. It's as simple as that. You should be building a relationship with someone and having a transaction of value. It's simple as that. It frustrates me that sales is seen as more complicated than that. It's your product has got to be worth the amount of cash that someone's going to pay for it and a little bit more, which is where you can come in and the added value of having a salesperson, an individual. If it's not, people are going to be frustrated. Now, your case specifically, if it's worth it to the bloke that you're speaking to and the woman who they're married presumably or whatever doesn't agree that it's worth it, this might be a sports car, a massive sexist stereotype, but if you're trying to push him down the lines of a sports car and he wants it and she wants something that's more suitable for carrying the kids around, again, massively sexist, appreciate that, but probably true in most situations, then there's going to be friction there. And what's going to happen is they're going to argue, they're never going to come back and they're never going to buy another sports car, and the bit of commission that you got on the front end for that, you're not going to see 3 years down the line, as I think most people start to lease the cars now lease hire rather than buy them. So every 3 years you've just lost out on, if you in that you've for 12 years obviously 3 or 4 deals depending on the lifespan of it. So in answer to your question, if people are feeling threatened, you're doing it wrong. You need to get everyone together, all the decision makers, and you need to make them happy. That's your job. If you're not a people person, then it's a problem. And if you're being aggressive about things, don't get me wrong, if there's a genuine deal on the table, everyone's happy, and without using the cliche win-win, if everyone's going to win, then I will go after it and I'll be ravaged and I will attack and close that deal. But if it's not perfect, then you've got to let people make their own decisions. And with all that said, that is the end of this episode of the show. As I mentioned or alluded to, so it's Wednesday today. Monday, I'm hoping to get this out as a podcast. So there'll be some subtle changes, as obviously as alluded to before. A lot of the video stuff doesn't quite work on audio. That includes like the intros. So there's going to be new intros coming Monday. I'll be working on them over the weekend. Probably new outro and some bits and pieces as well. But the question for the comments is, how would you change the show? What would you, and be totally brutally honest, if you think that the show shouldn't exist, tell me. If you think that I shouldn't be doing it, but you like the premise, there's plenty of people within the salesman.red world that we can get involved in this. If you want more questions, less questions, more sales, more lifestyle, more business, more just general stuff about me, because I can see this turning into a bit of a vlog at some point because it's daily and we're growing at such a rapid pace. So yeah, leave your comments below and don't forget to subscribe.